Hey guys, I wanted to jump on and share a story that has been on my heart for quite a while now, and I'm finally going to jump on and share this because so many profound insights came from this experience that I know will definitely help others who are maybe going through something similar. End of 2019, I experienced a relationship ending, and it was a very significant experience for me where I spent... I was left with feeling so much sadness and grief and pain and hurt, and all of it was just so intense that as a self-protection mechanism, and this is something that humans do a lot, right? When we experience these really intense emotions that we don't want to feel, as a self-protection mechanism, I created a layer of anger. And I created this layer of anger by feeding myself with stories and lies about my previous partner, about how bad he is and about all the things he did and you know, all of these things to validate and justify this anger that I had created. And so I created this anger, and I continued to feed the fire with all of these stories and these lies about all the things that he did. And eventually I had fed this fire of anger so much that the emotion became so intense that once again, as a self-protection mechanism, which once again all of us humans do, I started suppressing that anger so I wouldn't have to feel it. And it's interesting because, the whole reason I had created this anger in the first place was to suppress the sadness and grief so I wouldn't have to feel that. And now I was suppressing the anger on top of that. And it takes so much energy to suppress our emotions. And, most of us, we're suppressing our emotions on autopilot. We don't even realize it. But it does take up so much energy. And so many people are feeling so lethargic. And, I really encourage you to get curious around if there is unresolved emotion and trauma that you are suppressing on autopilot, because it does take so much energy. And that's exactly what happened to me. I spent all of last year paralyzed in bed because I was using so much energy to suppress so much emotion. And it wasn't until January this year when I went and saw my previous partner for the first time in a year. I had some stuff at his house that I had to go collect. And when I saw him, all of that, it triggered all of that unresolved emotion, all of it, like anger and the sadness and the hurt and the pain, all of it was coming to the surface. And I'm like trying to still suppress it so that I can have like a conversation with him and hold myself together. And it was all very overwhelming. And I got the stuff and I left and I went on this 5-hour drive. And as I'm driving, all of that emotion, all that suppressed emotion is all coming to the surface, and it's so overwhelming, and there's no suppressing it by this point, because it was there. It was there for me to look at. And so I started unpacking all of these emotions, and this is when all of the insights came through that I really want to share with you. Firstly, looking at that anger and rage and realizing that I had created that. I had created that with stories and lies that I had told myself, and I was walking through life perceiving reality through the lens of these lies that I was telling myself, collecting evidence to prove that these lies were true, totally disregarding anything that proved otherwise. And adding fuel to this fire. And when I realized that I had created this anger and rage because of lies that I had told myself, I had let go of that. And after I'd let go of that anger and rage that I had created myself, I asked myself, why did I do that? Why did I create all of that? Why did I lie to myself to feed this anger and rage? Why would I put myself through all that suffering? And this is when I realized that I had created that anger to protect myself from feeling the sadness and the grief that was underneath it. And so for the first time, I allowed myself to drop into that sadness and grief and really feel it. And it was through the process of really feeling into that sadness and grief and going through that process, I eventually got to the core of that sadness and grief. And ultimately, the core of the sadness and the grief was once again a lie that I had told myself. And once again, this is something that humans do a lot. When our relationship had ended, I had lied to myself that I wasn't worthy of love, I'm not good enough, And I even lied to myself that he had abandoned me, when in reality, I had abandoned myself. I had abandoned believing that I was good enough and that I was worthy. And I was walking through life, once again, perceiving reality through that lens of I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy, looking for evidence to prove that lie to be true, totally disregarding anything otherwise, which then, created all this sadness and grief, which I was then suppressing as a self-protection mechanism. And then I created the anger and all the stories, once again, as a self-protection mechanism. And then I started suppressing that because that was too much for me too. And then I'm like suppressing all this as a self-protection mechanism, which kept me paralyzed in bed. And, we think the suppressing is a self-protection mechanism, when in reality, the real freedom comes from dropping in and feeling your emotions. I could have liberated myself from all of that if I just allowed myself to drop in and feel the sadness and the grief when the relationship had first ended. Instead of trying to suppress and avoid and lie to myself, which once again humans do a lot. We walk through life perceiving reality through the lens of lies that we tell ourselves, that we're not good enough, we're not worthy. And then it creates all these emotions. It's basically, I spent all of last year in self-created, self-inflicted suffering because of the lies that I was telling myself. And this is something that, like I said, we do a lot as humans. And so I love to share this message with you guys, because I'd love for us to get curious around if this is what can happen if we feed ourselves these lies. I mean, all of our reality is created through what we tell ourselves. And if I created an entire year of not being able to get out of bed because I was telling myself that I'm not worthy and I'm not good enough, I've been abandoned, and then creating all of these emotions and then suppressing all this, if we can create all that and create our reality, I want us to get curious around what will happen if we tell ourselves the truth about ourselves. The truth that we are worthy, that we are good enough. When we walk through life looking through that lens, collecting the evidence to support that, our reality would be totally different. I spent all of last year looking for evidence that love doesn't exist. But what if we walk through life looking through the lens of love does exist and collecting the evidence to support that? So anyone who is going through something similar, I hope that this message is of value to you around how the lies that we tell ourselves, and maybe they feel like the truth, but they're not the truth. We are inherently worthy. We are inherently lovable. We are whole, perfect, and complete as we are. And if we feed ourselves that truth, the life that we're living would be totally different. So that's all from me today, guys. I hope that's been of value. If it is, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if not as well, I'd also love to hear your thoughts. And that's all from me. Hope you have a lovely day.